Jalen Mercer had barely crossed the gym doorway when Coach Dalton barked, "You again? Thought we were done pretending you could run." The team burst into laughter as Jalen's limp dragged across the polished floor like a crime scene mark. But before he could speak, a player muttered, "They didn't tell him what they found in the archive, did they?" The room went silent, and suddenly every face was watching Jalen like he was the only one who didn't know the truth. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The echo of basketballs died the moment Jalen Mercer stepped into the gym. It wasn't gradual, it was abrupt, like someone had yanked a cord from a machine. Sneakers stilled against the polished floor. Conversation clipped mid-sentence, and every head turned toward the door where he stood, thin, quiet, and slightly hunched as if bracing for impact before it even arrived. His right shoe was untied. He didn't notice until he felt the lace brush against the ground, dragging with each uneven step. The limp was subtle, the kind that could have been mistaken for fatigue if anyone cared enough to give him the benefit of doubt. But in this building, in this school, doubt only flowed in one direction, and it never flowed toward boys like him. Coach Rick Dalton stood near the bleachers with a clipboard tucked against his hip. His jaw tightened at the sight of Jalen, though the expression barely lasted a heartbeat. What replaced it was worse, a slow curl of amusement that sharpened into something knowingly cruel. "You lost, son?" Dalton's voice carried easily in the gym's cavernous space. "This ain't the nurse's office." A ripple of laughter rolled through the room. Not the spontaneous kind, that bursts out without intention. This was selective, obedient, performative. Players glanced sidelong at the coach to know how loud they were allowed to laugh, how far they could push it without crossing a line. The coach didn't stop them. He smirked, shoulders lifting in what could have been interpreted as harmless teasing. But nothing about this moment was harmless, and everyone in the room felt it. Jalen froze, hand still pressed against the strap of the backpack hanging from his shoulder. He hadn't planned on being the center of attention. He had hoped to slip inside, find the sign-in sheet, and quietly exist the way he had learned to survive at every new school by shrinking, until he took up as little space as possible. But humiliation had a way of dragging a person into the open. He lifted his chin slightly, saying nothing. His silence only invited more of the attention he didn't want. A tall white senior with a buzz cut nudged the teammate beside him. "I thought tryouts were for athletes," he whispered too loudly to be accidental. The teammate snickered. "Man can barely walk straight." The laughter swelled again, this time harsher, freer. The kind that tasted bitter even if you weren't the target. Jalen inhaled slowly. Coach Dalton's eyes stayed fixed on him the whole time, studying him as if he were confused about why the boy hadn't disappeared yet. "Well?" Dalton asked, his voice soft but edged with impatience. "You here to watch from the bleachers? This ain't no charity program." A few heads nodded in agreement. Some smirked. A couple boys just looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to show it. Jalen finally stepped forward, the limp more pronounced with every hit of the polished floor. He hated the sound it made. Uneven, imperfect, noticeable. "I'm here for track tryouts," he said quietly. Dalton blinked once, a short motion that revealed irritation. "Track tryouts." He let out a dry laugh. "Son, we're preparing for timed drills, not hosting rehabilitation practice." The laughter hit harder this time, uglier, echoing off the walls like someone had intentionally amplified it. Jalen didn't flinch. He kept his eyes ahead. But inside, something shifted. A tiny tightening in his chest, an old memory clawing upward. He'd spent months learning how to walk again, without wincing. Months convincing himself that his knee wasn't as weak as doctors warned. He thought he had finally left the worst behind him. Yet here he was, being torn open again, by a room full of strangers, who didn't know anything about the boy limping in front of them. Dalton turned back to his clipboard as if finished with the interaction. "If you're looking for the list of extracurricular accommodations, the counselor's office is down the hall." A low chuckle rolled through the players. Jalen swallowed, fighting down the old instinct to retreat. "I'm not looking for accommodations," he said, voice firmer now. "I'm looking for the sign-in sheet." Dalton's head tilted just barely. The room held its breath. "Sign-in sheets for runners," he replied. "I know." Jalen kept his posture steady. "That's why I'm here." Dalton stared at him for a long moment, expression unreadable. If the coach expected Jalen to shrink, he wasn't getting it. If he expected tears, he wasn't getting that either. Instead, he was met with a surprising resilience, quiet, but unmistakable. After several tense seconds, the coach exhaled through his nose, something between annoyance and disbelief. "Fine," he said. "Paperwork's on the table, not that you'll need it long." The comment hung in the air, heavy, pointed. Jalen moved toward the folding table at the far end of the gym. His limp made each step feel like burning spotlight beams were chasing him. He reached the table, picked up the pen, and signed his name with a grip so tight he didn't realize his hand had begun to tremble. Behind him, murmurs started. He didn't have to turn around to know they were about him. "Why's he even here?" whispered someone. "Isn't he the kid from... He shouldn't even be trying out after last year. Man, this is gonna be a joke." The words lodged into the back of his mind, sharp as broken glass. When he straightened, Coach Dalton was whispering something to an assistant coach, both men occasionally glancing Jalen's way. They weren't subtle. They didn't need to be. His throat tightened, but he forced himself to breathe normally. He wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching him falter. He stepped toward the exit doors, deciding it was better to wait outside until warm-ups began. The gym felt colder than it looked. Too many eyes, too many assumptions, too many ghosts he hadn't invited. As he passed a row of players, one boy stuck out his foot just slightly, not enough to be obvious, but enough that Jalen had to adjust his balance at the last second. His knee nearly buckled. The boys snickered. "Careful," one muttered. "You're not built for floors this clean." Jalen didn't respond. Silence was safer. Silence had always been safer. He reached the door. His hand touched the handle, and for a moment, for the smallest, weakest moment, he wondered if he should leave. Not because he believed Dalton's words, but because the weight of everybody else's stare down made his chest feel too tight for air. But then a voice, soft and controlled, drifted from somewhere behind him. He shouldn't be here, after what happened last year. The speaker's face wasn't clear. The tone wasn't familiar, but the gym reacted instantly. Players going still, their laughter dying in their throats as if the words carried a history none of them wanted spoken out loud. Jalen froze. After what happened last year, the phrase struck like a slap. No one here should have known. His records were sealed, his hospital files restricted. His family had moved across the state specifically so no one would bring up the incident again. So how did someone know? And worse, why were they saying it now? Jalen turned slowly, trying to locate the voice in the sea of suddenly guarded expressions. But no one looked back at him. No one admitted to speaking. No one even blinked. For the first time since stepping into the gym, the laughter didn't feel like the threat. The silence did. As Jalen scanned the room, a single pair of eyes high on the bleachers, half hidden behind a hood, locked onto him with unmistakable recognition, and the boy mouthed words only Jalen could see. "You didn't outrun it." The words clung to the walls like damp smoke. He shouldn't be here, after what happened last year. They shouldn't have meant anything. Not in this town, not in a place where no one should have known him, where the slate was supposed to be clean. But Jalen knew better. There's no such thing as a clean slate when you're a black boy with a public scar. He didn't look back, not at the hooded figure on the bleachers, not at the players whispering just beneath laughter. He pushed through the heavy gym doors and stepped into the chill of the evening, where the fading sun painted the sky in bruised streaks of purple and gray. He inhaled deeply, the air cutting his throat like something metallic, and walked until the sound of bouncing basketballs became just a ghost behind him. The pain in his knee was sharp by the time he reached the edge of the parking lot. But it wasn't the kind that demanded rest. It was the kind that reminded you who you were. The kind that never truly left. Across the lot, his mother's old Chevy idled quietly. Inside, Lana Mercer gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. She was watching the building, her jaw clenched the way it always was when she feared the world might make her son small again. Jalen climbed in, tossed his backpack into the back seat, and said nothing. "They didn't even let you run yet, did they?" she asked softly, eyes still forward. "No," he muttered, fastening his seatbelt. "Didn't need to." She didn't ask for more. She knew better. The look in his eyes told her everything. The gym had already done what gyms like that always did. As they drove, silence stretched between them, like a string pulled too tight. Streetlights flickered above, each flash slicing time into small, lonely pieces. Jalen stared out the window, letting the past creep back in. The part of his life he'd buried under new zip codes and changed area codes. 1 year ago, he wasn't limping. 1 year ago, Jalen Mercer was a rising star at Roosevelt High. a black-run magnet school on the east side of Montgomery. Coaches said he had the raw speed of a college sprinter and the poise of someone twice his age. He had trophies, scholarships being whispered about, and a team that wore his name like a badge of pride. Then came the night. It was supposed to be routine. A late run to the gas station for Gatorade. Headphones in, hoodie up. It wasn't even that late. Just after 9 he walked in with $6 and walked out with change and a drink. 3 blocks down. Blue and red flooded the street. The cruiser door flung open before he could blink. Stop right there. Hands where I can see them. He was 17. His legs knew only one response. Run. Not out of guilt. Out of survival. Out of instinct shaped by 1,000 warnings from men like his uncle and older cousins. If you see flashing lights, run. If you're wearing a hoodie at night, run. If your skin is darker than the sidewalk, run. He ran. And within seconds he was tackled from behind. Not onto grass, not onto pavement, into a ditch lined with jagged concrete edges and rusted wire. He remembered the crack first, the sick, dry snap that screamed louder than he ever could. Then the shouting. Then the weight of knees and elbows pressing into his back. Then the cold, hard fact that he would not be walking the same after this. The official report said he resisted arrest, that he matched the description of a robbery suspect from 2 neighborhoods away. No one mentioned that the real suspect had already been apprehended, that he looked nothing like Jalen beyond the color of his skin. There was no apology, no press coverage, just a quiet settlement behind closed doors, and a school transfer offer dressed up like a fresh start. Roosevelt let him go with silence. His coach didn't return calls. His name vanished from district leaderboards. The emails from scouts went cold. All he had left was a brace on his leg, and a mother whose faith stayed louder than the silence. Things are different here, she had told him the night they arrived in Fairhope, Alabama. Keep your head down. Prove them wrong quietly. But quiet didn't work when people already decided who you were. Back in the car, Lana reached over, resting her hand briefly on his shoulder. You want me to call somebody? The school board? That coach? Jalen shook his head. No. That's what they want. For me to look angry. For me to react. Lana looked over, worried. And what do you want? He didn't answer right away. He watched the trees blur past the window. I want to run again, he said finally. She didn't speak, but her fingers tightened just a little more on the steering wheel. By the time they pulled into their apartment complex, a worn-down red brick square tucked between an abandoned gas station and a liquor store. Jalen's knee was throbbing, but not enough to slow him. As he stepped out, he climbed the stairs without a limp, or at least without letting it show. Some days he could fake it for hours. Others he couldn't fake it for seconds. Tonight he forced it to disappear. In his room, the trophies from his old school were tucked away in a shoebox. He pulled one out, a silver plate etched with regional champion, 400 min of sprint. He turned it over in his hands like a relic, then tucked it under his pillow, as if its weight might help him sleep. But sleep didn't come. Instead, he lay there staring at the ceiling, his mind looping back to the boy in the bleachers, the one who mouthed those 5 words like a curse. You didn't outrun it. That meant something. That wasn't just a dig. That was personal. Was it a student from Roosevelt? Someone from Montgomery? No, that didn't make sense. The school's records were sealed, and Lana made sure of it. They'd moved towns, changed numbers, scrubbed social accounts. So how? The question spun in his head long past midnight, until he finally reached for his phone. That's when he saw it. A new text from an unknown number. No contact name. No profile photo. It simply read, "Don't quit. Midnight. Old track." His breath caught in his throat. He stared at the message for a long minute, scrolling up to make sure it wasn't part of a thread. It wasn't. This was the first, and it had arrived just minutes ago. The old track wasn't listed on school maps, but Jalen had seen it on the walk home one day. A fenced-in oval behind the maintenance building, overgrown with weeds and abandoned hurdles rusting in the grass. No one used it. Not officially. Midnight. Old track. He reread the message again. Then again. Was it a trap? A joke? Or was someone finally reaching out, not to mock, not to test, but to help? His heart was still hammering when he grabbed his hoodie, laced up his sneakers, both shoes this time, and stepped quietly into the hallway. His mother's room was silent. The apartment was still. Jalen didn't know what he would find out there, but something in him, Something deeper than fear. Told him that whoever sent that message already knew him better than this entire town ever would. As he stepped into the night, his phone buzzed again. This time, just a photo. Blurry. Taken from the bleachers. He was in it. Walking across the gym with his limp in full view. The caption read, "We remember everything you tried to forget." The air at midnight held a different kind of silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that wrapped itself around your neck like a warning. It clung to the cracked pavement and the broken bleachers, turning shadows into silhouettes that watched too long and too still. Jalen moved with careful steps, hoodie pulled tight over his head, breath fogging the air as he crept behind the school grounds. The main track, polished and brightly lit during the day, was nowhere near here. This place was forgotten. Unloved. The way the grass had grown wild through the lanes said everything the school wouldn't. This space had been erased on purpose. The old track, as the text called it, wasn't just neglected. It had been intentionally buried. Rusted chain-link fences curled around the oval, like bent ribs. Graffiti scrawled across old equipment. Some of it faded, some fresh. A single word repeated in red, near the gate. Unfit. He stopped at the entrance. No lights. No sound. Just the kind of silence that made your skin question if it was still wanted. Then he saw him. A lone figure moved in the center lane, not running but pacing. Long strides, posture straight, arms swinging with memory. Even from a distance, Jalen knew it wasn't a student. This man was older, taller, and something about the way he moved felt rehearsed. Not athletic, but military, controlled, scarred. Jalen opened the creaking gate. The man turned, but didn't flinch. His eyes locked onto Jalen, as if he'd expected him to come, maybe even needed him to. He said nothing. Jalen stepped forward, unsure. "You're the one who texted me." The man nodded once. "Malik." Just the name. No last name, no explanation. But it hit Jalen harder than a full introduction ever could. That name had floated like a ghost around Fairhope High since orientation. The black athlete whose name vanished from every plaque. The one no one mentioned, but whose silence echoed louder than the school's anthem. "I've heard about you," Jalen said, his voice quieter than he meant. "Not from anyone here, you haven't." Malik turned and began to walk the curve of the track. Jalen followed instinctively, limping slightly to match the pace.
"A state champion here,"
Malik said after a long pause. 400 meters, 46 seconds flat, broke the school's record, broke the state's, got a full ride to LSU. Jalen blinked. "Then why?" "They erased me before I even packed my bags." Malik didn't look at him. Said I stepped out of my lane. Called it a violation. Disqualified the time. Jalen's brows furrowed. "But, if you broke the record..."
"They couldn't let a black boy from a rented house take a record that had belonged to 3 white captains in a row," Malik cut in. "So they clipped my wings before I ever lifted off." He slowed to a stop and turned. "That track inside, that polished picture-perfect circle, they built that a year after I graduated. And they built it over this one." Jalen glanced down. The track beneath their feet was cracked, faded, but the curve was still visible, like a scar the school couldn't quite erase. "They were gonna pave this place. Said it wasn't regulation. Said it wasn't safe." Malik's voice dipped, but it wasn't the track they wanted gone. It was me. Jalen felt the wind cut through his jacket. Suddenly, everything he'd experienced, the locker room silence, the coach's smirk, the way eyes followed him like a target, made sense in a way that felt too familiar. This wasn't new. This was recycled. Malik sat on an old tire by the fence, motioning for Jalen to sit. "What happened to your leg?" he asked softly. Jalen hesitated. He had rehearsed the answer so many times. Slipped in the rain. Old sports injury. Skateboard fall. But not tonight. "Police tackled me," he said. "Wrong guy. Crushed my knee on a storm drain." Malik nodded slowly. "And they let you come here?" "They offered this school as part of the deal. Said it was a quiet transfer. Mom thought a new start would help." "New start?" Malik chuckled. "But there was no humor. This place feeds on kids like you. Makes them feel like the problem, then punishes them for proving otherwise." Jalen stared down at the weeds growing between the track cracks. "I want to run again," he whispered. "I don't care if they laugh. I don't care what the coach says. I want them to see." Malik looked at him long and hard. Then, finally, "Good. Because they hate what they can't outrun."
He stood, walked to the middle lane, and dropped into a crouch, the starting position of a sprinter. You run like you've already been broken. That's good. Means you don't fear breaking again. Jalen watched. Something about the way Malik dropped into that position, back straight, fingers kissing the ground. One knee bent like prayer, was haunting. You gonna teach me? Jalen asked, stepping forward. I'm not a coach, Malik replied. I'm a mirror. What you see in me is what you can be, if you survive this place. He pointed to the far end of the track. That's 100 meters. Get there in under 14 seconds, and I'll come back tomorrow. Jalen looked down at his leg. The joint ached. The metal brace wrapped under his sweatpants felt tighter with the cold, but something inside him, deeper than the pain, pushed him forward. He took position beside Malik. On your own count, Malik said. Jalen nodded, breathed in. 3, 2, he exploded forward. Or tried to. His left leg fired like it used to, but the right struggled to keep rhythm. His arms pumped. The wind slapped his face. The night pulled at his lungs. Every step was defiance. Every stagger a protest. He crossed the 100-meter mark. Malik clicked a stopwatch, looked, and said nothing. Jalen bent over, hands on his knees, gasping. How bad? 17.8, Malik said flatly. Jalen winced. But Malik added, that's 17 seconds faster than anyone who quit. Jalen smiled, breathless. And then, a low rumble. Both heads turned toward the fence. Headlights. A black car idled just beyond the trees. No engine rev, no honk, just the soft glow of halogens, slicing through the dark, motionless, watching. Jalen stepped back. You know them? No, Malik said. But they know you. The passenger side window rolled down an inch, just enough for the red light of a phone screen to flicker behind the glass. They were being recorded. Jalen's mouth went dry. Should we go? Malik didn't move. They want us scared. That's the whole game. He turned, unbothered. You come tomorrow? Jalen hesitated. Even if they come back. Malik nodded. Especially if they come back. The car didn't move. The phone stayed steady, record. Jalen stepped into the night, the weight of 100 secrets pressing against his back. But it wasn't fear that filled his chest. It was something else, something worse. The knowledge that someone in that car had known exactly where he'd be. The next morning, Jalen opened his locker and froze. Inside was a folded piece of paper, scrawled in thick black ink, run again, and we'll finish what the cops started. The locker note sat in Jalen's hand longer than he meant to hold it. The words bled through the cheap paper in jagged strokes, a threat disguised as a challenge, a warning wrapped in cruelty. Run again, and we'll finish what the cops started. He folded it slowly, fighting the tremor in his fingers. Inside the locker room, voices carried in bursts. Laughter, the metallic clink of lockers, the careless confidence of boys who had never tasted fear. For a moment he wondered if any of them wrote it, or if the message came from someone outside this room, someone who watched him through the lens of a phone in the shadows of the old track. But the worst part wasn't not knowing who. It was knowing anyone here could have. Practice began with the same cold indifference as always. Coach Dalton didn't look at Jalen when he stepped onto the field. He didn't need to. His silence was its own language, one everyone understood. The team lined up along the starting lane. Dalton paced back and forth, whistle swinging loosely from his hand, tapping against his chest in an unhurried rhythm. We're tightening drills today, he announced. Some of you been running like you're doing it for a hobby. We're not here for hobbies. We're here for state titles. Several boys nodded, grinning with the bravado Dalton fed them. Jalen stayed at the far end, stretching silently, keeping weight off the knee that still pulsed faintly from the night before. Dalton's eyes flicked toward him. The whistle didn't move, but his lip curled. Mercer, Dalton said, loud enough for the whole lane to hear. You sure you can handle today? We don't have insurance for charity cases. A few boys snorted. Some laughed outright. Jalen kept stretching. I'll manage, he said simply. Dalton tilted his head, almost amused. Affirmative action ain't gonna save that leg, son. You better hope sympathy counts as speed. The laughter this time was sharper, more confident, as if the coach had given them permission to enjoy the cruelty. Jalen straightened, meeting Dalton's gaze. I'm not here for sympathy. No, Dalton replied. You're here for attention. Big difference. The whistle blasted. First drill 400 mammon. Full pace. No brakes. The team shot forward like released arrows. Jalen pushed off slower, not from fear but from control. Malik's instruction echoed in his mind. You don't chase speed, you build it quietly. But Coach Dalton wasn't looking for quiet strength. He wanted a spectacle. Every time Jalen rounded the curve, Dalton had moved the cone slightly farther than regulation, just enough to make his lap longer. Not enough to be obvious, but enough that the players noticed and said nothing. Pick up speed, Mercer, Dalton barked. My grandmother could outrun you and she's been dead 10 years. Jalen kept going, even as the knee burned. By the time he crossed what should have been the finish mark, the others were already resting. Dalton didn't call time. He simply looked bored. Again. A murmur moved through the team. Confusion, discomfort. But Dalton's glare kept them silent. Jalen didn't argue. He moved back to the starting line. The second lap stabbed more than it hurt. Every stride fought the lingering damage. Every breath reminded him of the night the cops crushed him into a ditch. But something deeper pushed him forward. The image of Malik under moonlight, the certainty in his voice. They hate what they can't outrun. When he finished, he leaned over, hands on his thighs, breathing hard. Dalton stood beside him, smirking. Tired already? Maybe you should have joined drama club. Jalen exhaled slowly. I'm fine. Good, Dalton said. Water break for everyone, except Mercer. He hasn't earned it. The boys hesitated, glancing between their coach and the water coolers. One dared to ask, Coach, he's limping. Maybe. Dalton glared at him, until the boy closed his mouth. If he wants special treatment, he's in the wrong country. The words hung there, sour and heavy. Jalen didn't respond. He knew responding only gave Dalton more to twist. Instead, he walked toward the field boundary, where the grass met gravel. He leaned briefly on the fence, letting the cold wire numb his palm. His throat felt dry, dust scraping every inhale. He forced himself back into the group when Dalton called for weights. The weight room, a cramped, sweat-scented cavern beneath the bleachers, felt even smaller when Dalton followed them inside. He adjusted weight stacks with casual precision, adding an extra 15 pounds to Jalen's bar when he passed by. I didn't ask for more, Jalen said. Didn't say you did, Dalton replied. Consider it motivation. A few players exchanged uneasy glances. One boy whispered, that's too much for his knee. Dalton snapped. You a doctor now? Or just another kid scared of hard work? He stared at Jalen. Lift. And Jalen did. Because backing down gave Dalton power, and pushing forward kept him from feeling the sting of humiliation. The weight dug into his palms. The bar shook slightly. Sweat rolled down his spine like cold oil. Again, Dalton ordered. Jalen lifted. Again, lift. Again. Or quit pretending you belong here. The words weren't loud, but they were precise. They knew exactly where to strike. When Dalton finally dismissed them, Jalen set the bar down with trembling hands. His knee throbbed, not from fresh injury, but from exhaustion brewed by spite. The rest of the team filed out quickly, too eager to escape the suffocating tension. A couple of them offered half-hearted nods in Jalen's direction. Apologies shaped like pity. Jalen hated pity. He stayed behind to wrap his ankle and breathe in silence. The weight room door clicked shut behind the last athlete, leaving him alone with the humming fluorescent lights and the faint echo of Dalton's voice bouncing off concrete walls. He peeled the old ankle wrap from his bag, the one Malik had told him to use, until his stride stabilized. It still smelled like sweat and resilience. He unwound it carefully, letting the fabric fall around his foot like a ritual. He reached for the water cooler beside the exit, empty. Not just empty, bone dry, tilted on its side slightly, as if someone had deliberately drained it. He wasn't surprised. He turned back to grab the wrap. That's when he froze. The wrap, the one he'd laid neatly across the bench, now looked wrong. The fabric had thinned in patches, frayed, discolored. A sharp chemical smell clouded the air. He touched it, and jerked his hand away. The fabric was damp, not with sweat, bleach. The fumes curled up quietly, wickedly. Enough bleach to weaken the material. Enough bleach to burn skin if he wrapped it around his ankle. Enough bleach to destroy whatever stability he had left. On top of it lay a small torn notebook page, folded once. Jalen stared at it for a long second before unfolding it. Still think you belong here. The handwriting was jagged, confident, not rushed. He felt the air shift around him. Not colder, not quieter, just heavier, like the room itself understood what this meant. Dalton hadn't needed to lay a hand on him. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to threaten outright. He simply let the environment do the violence for him. The drills, the added weight, the missing water, the bleach. This wasn't coaching. This was a war. A psychological slow burn, meant to break him without leaving a bruise. Jalen folded the note, sliding it into his pocket, as carefully as if it were a live wire. He stepped out of the weight room into the hallway. The school lights flickered overhead. Footsteps echoed somewhere in the distance. Rhythmic, steady, deliberate. He turned. No one. But something on the floor caught his eye. Faint puddles leading down the hall. The same chemical sheen as the bleach on his wrap. Wet footprints. A trail. Leading away from the locker room. Leading toward the exit. Leading into the night. His heart hammered, not from fear but from clarity. Someone wasn't just trying to break him on the track. They were watching every move he made. As he stepped outside, his phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. Next time, we won't warn you. The next morning, Jalen arrived at school early, not to train, but to search. Sleep had barely touched him. The bleach-soaked wrap, the thread inside his locker, the message on his phone. They kept replaying in his mind, louder than footsteps, sharper than pain. He knew he wasn't just being targeted. He was being tracked, tested, as if someone was daring him to crack. But they didn't understand who he was. They didn't know what it meant to rebuild a leg doctors said would never sprint again. He could take pain. What he couldn't take, what he wouldn't take was silence. That morning, the sky hung heavy with gray. The hallways were near empty, except for a few janitors pushing mop carts, and the occasional teacher sipping from travel mugs. Jalen walked past the trophy case without stopping. He'd memorized it months ago. The same smiling faces, the same names engraved in gold plates. Decade after decade of white champions, white captains, white records. Malik's name wasn't there, not even one. He turned down the corridor leading to the old gym, the one connected to the original locker rooms. Most students didn't go near it. The new facility was flashy, modern, easier to access. But Jalen had noticed something last week. A door tucked behind the back stairwell, sealed with chipped paint and half-rusted hinges. No label, no light. Today, it was unlocked. He pushed it open. The smell hit first. Dust, mildew, old leather. The hallway was narrow, lined with unused lockers. The air felt forgotten, like time didn't flow here the same way it did. Outside, he moved slowly, fingers grazing the metal doors. As he walked, listening, at the end of the hall was a short set of stairs leading to a small exit. The door at the bottom had been propped open with a cracked brick. Through it, he could see the edge of the school's outer wall. And that's when he noticed it. A faint gleam behind the overgrown ivy covering the base of the building. Something metallic. Something rectangular. He stepped closer, pulling at the vines with steady hands, until the plaque revealed itself, half buried in dirt. Its screws rusted, its letters nearly worn to nothing. But they were still legible. Malik Wright, state champion. The year was wrong. The history books said there was no state champion from Fairhope in 2006. They said the record was disqualified. They said the final was void. But here it was. A plaque with the truth carved into it. As real as any in the front hallway. Only this one had been deliberately hidden. Disrespected. Covered up. Scratches gouged the metal across Malik's name. As if someone had tried to erase not just the title but the person. Jalen crouched, brushing off the dirt around the base. That's when he saw it. Faint red spray paint beneath the vines. A word, barely visible. Liar. He stared at it, jaw tightening. There was nothing accidental about this. They had celebrated him, until they didn't, and when they couldn't deny his speed, they tried to destroy his memory. He stepped back, heart pounding in his chest, thoughts racing. If they went this far to bury a name, what else had they hidden? He turned around, retracing his steps into the building, but this time with purpose. Back in the hallway he followed the janitor's trail, the subtle signs of morning maintenance. A cracked mop bucket, a water trail, leading to the edge of the gymnasium. And then, finally, a small wooden door with a louvered top panel and a padlock hanging open. A janitor's closet. He glanced around. No one in sight. He opened it. The smell inside was stronger. Bleach, ammonia, old paper. Shelves lined the walls with cleaning supplies, cardboard boxes, and tangled extension cords. But on the top shelf, behind a stack of folded gym mats, something caught his eye. He reached up hard in his throat. VHS tapes. 3 of them. Each labeled in thick black marker. Malik finals. Practice day. Malik DQ review. Do not duplicate. Jalen stared at the labels, like they were written in fire. The dates matched the state championship. And the second tape, DQ review. That wasn't something schools gave to janitors. That was internal. Deliberate. Restricted. He grabbed all 3. But as he turned to leave, his eyes caught something else. Tucked into a plastic bin of discarded files. An envelope with the school's letterhead, creased and slightly torn. He pulled it out. Inside was a faded printout. An email chain. He skimmed it. Breath-catching. To athletic director. From. Principal's office. Subject, record removal. Sensitive matter. We've confirmed Mr. Wright crossed lanes. 0.4 seconds prior to finish. Protocol suggests disqualification due to sportsmanship conflict. Consider handling quietly. We suggest repurposing plaque or remove entirely if necessary. Below it, handwritten notes. Coach D, get confirmation footage and file under maintenance logs, not admin server. Jalen's throat dried. This wasn't a mistake. This was a cover-up. They hadn't just disqualified Malik. They rewrote the outcome. He stepped back out of the closet, tapes gripped tightly, eyes scanning the hallway. Still empty. But he didn't feel alone. He hurried toward the stairwell. The door at the top creaked as he pushed through. As he emerged into the main hallway, he heard a voice down the corridor. Unmistakable, sharp. Mercer. He turned. Coach Dalton. The man stood with a towel slung over one shoulder. Arms folded, face unreadable. You always go digging through janitors' closets before class? Dalton asked. Jalen kept his expression steady. Was looking for an ice pack. Dalton's eyes dropped to the tapes. What's that? Old gym footage, Jalen said quickly. Coach Red said I could review my form. Dalton stepped closer. Slowly, eyes narrowing. He didn't buy it, not fully, but he also didn't have proof to question harder. Funny, Dalton said. I didn't think kids still knew what VHS was. Jalen shrugged. Old school works for me. Dalton stared at him a beat longer. Then, with a small smirk, be careful what you watch. Some things are better left buried. The warning wasn't subtle, and it wasn't about tapes. Jalen said nothing, just turned and walked, each step deliberate, tapes tucked under his arm, like evidence. His pulse raced, but not from fear, from clarity. They buried Malik to preserve a lie. Now they were watching Jalen closely, waiting for him to either fall or dig too deep. He reached his locker, slid the tapes into the false bottom of his backpack, zipped it shut. But as he turned the combination to close it, a note fluttered out, not handwritten, printed. Those tapes never existed. And neither did Malik. You're already one warning past safe. He looked up fast, scanning the hallway. No one there. No footsteps. No shadows. Just the cold, echoing sound of a truth they were desperate to keep hidden. And the very real danger of exposing it. That night, Jalen dusted off an old VHS player from a thrift store and inserted the tape labeled Malik Finals. The screen flickered. The race began. And in the final 3 seconds, Malik never stepped out of his lane. But someone else did. A white runner. The coach's son. By the end of the week, Coach Dalton didn't need to say anything to let Jalen know something was coming. The signs were subtle at first. Quiet glances between players. A smirk exchanged between assistant coaches. Even the announcements over the intercom had shifted, replacing the usual reminders with upbeat chants about school unity and healthy competition. The real shift came on Friday morning. As students filed into the cafeteria for first period breakfast, a large poster hung across the gym hallway. Showdown at lunch. Mercer vs. Carver. Friendly 400. Below it, smaller text. Witness greatness. Bring your phones. Henceforward hope fast. Jalen stopped mid-step, backpack still slung over one shoulder. Carver. Alec Carver. Team captain, senior, blue-eyed golden boy of Fairhope High's track legacy. Tall, lean, arrogant, fast, but not as fast as the myth said. His times were good, not record-shattering. What made Alec untouchable wasn't his speed. It was his last name. His father was on the school board. His uncle worked in city council. And most importantly, his godfather was none other than Coach Dalton. Students buzzed around the sign, laughing, filming, tagging each other. One girl whispered, "He's actually going through with it. With that limp?" "I heard Coach called it a character test," someone replied. "Like to see if Mercer's got the guts." Jalen clenched his jaw and walked on. He hadn't agreed to any race. He hadn't even been asked. By midday, the bleachers near the field were half full, rare for a school day. Students lined the fences, phones already recording, lenses trained like weapons. Some wore face paint. Others held signs with Alec's name written in glitter. No one cheered for Jalen. He walked onto the field in silence, wearing his old cross trainers and a compression sleeve barely holding his knee together. Sweat already gathered at the nape of his neck, but it wasn't from heat. It was from the eyes. So many eyes. Coach Dalton stood at the center line, whistle hanging from his mouth like a grin that didn't need to speak. Glad you showed, he said dryly. Didn't want to have to forfeit you by cowardice. Jalen didn't answer. Alec Carver stretched nearby, headphones in, mouthing the lyrics to some pump-up anthem, while his friends slapped him on the back. His uniform was spotless, cleats shined, hair styled. He looked like a walking ad for privilege, the kind that had never been challenged, never needed to be. 2 laps, Dalton called out. Standard 400, nothing fancy. He looked at Jalen, eyes narrowing. Try not to fall this time. School liabilities already maxed out. Laughter rose from the bleachers, phones lifted higher. Jalen took position at the starting line, heart thudding like a drumline behind his ribs. The world narrowed. The crowd became static. The whispers dissolved into silence. Just him, and the track, and the twisted expectation that this wasn't meant to be a race. It was meant to be a fall. Dalton raised his hand. On my count. 3, 2, 1. Whistle. They exploded off the line. Or at least, Alec did. Jalen's first few strides were cautious, measured. His knee screamed against the force, but he kept pace, trailing only by a few lengths. He could hear Alec's shoes slapping the track ahead of him. Smooth, practiced, perfect. Jalen pushed harder. Each step sent a flash of pain up his thigh. His breath shortened, his vision blurred at the corners, but he was gaining, slowly. The bleachers roared. Halfway through the second lap, Jalen was almost shoulder to shoulder. For a moment, a terrifying electric moment, he believed he could win. Then his foot struck a divot. Tiny. Barely there, but enough. His ankle twisted. The pressure shot through his knee like a gunshot. He stumbled. His leg gave out, and he fell hard face first into the dirt-packed outer lane. The world jolted sideways. A sharp pop cracked through his knee. The field went dead silent for a second. Then someone laughed. Then a dozen more. A cacophony. Phones pointed down from every angle. Students leaned forward, filming, gasping, recording pain like it was a performance. Alec crossed the finish line without looking back. Coach Dalton didn't move. Jalen tried to rise. His hands shook. Blood trickled down his chin. His knee screamed in protest. The sleeve was soaked through. But it wasn't the fall that hurt most. It was the clapping. Slow. Sarcastic. Dalton clapped from the sidelines. That's what you call effort, boys. Anyone else want to challenge the captain? The crowd erupted. Jalen stayed down. Not from weakness, but because standing up now would only make them think they'd won. By the time school ended, the video was everywhere. Different angles, different captions. Mercer eats dirt. Coach's joke gone wrong. Fair hope fast fails. Some edits added sound effects. One even looped his fall to music. The comments were brutal. Bro should have stayed in the nurse's office. This is why you don't recruit from court settlements. Tell me he didn't really think he could beat Alec. Me still racist. Jalen sat in the back of the bus, earbuds in, phone dark. He didn't watch the video. He didn't need to. The laughter in the hallway had told him enough. His mother said nothing when he walked in that night, just handed him an ice pack and kissed his forehead like he was still a boy. Not a headline. He laid on the couch, sleeve off, leg elevated. The swelling was bad, but he didn't flinch. He had fallen before, but never like this. This wasn't just about speed anymore. It was about control. They weren't just mocking his body. They were testing his dignity. And something in him knew. If he quit now, it would become truth. He would become what they wanted him to be. The mistake that proved their point. So he didn't quit. Instead, he picked up his phone, opened the anonymous messaging app he'd installed after the threat started, typed one sentence. They recorded everything. But what happens when they can't? He hit send. To no one. To everyone. Just to see who responded. The next morning the video was gone. Not flagged. Not reported. Deleted. Everywhere. From Instagram. From TikTok. From school servers. From archived emails, even the text threads that mocked him were wiped clean. Every repost, every comment gone like it had never existed. Jalen blinked at the empty screens, stunned. The silence that replaced the cruelty wasn't comforting. It was orchestrated. He asked a few kids at lunch. "Video got taken down, right?" he said to one teammate. The boy looked confused. "What video?" he asked another girl who'd filmed it herself. She laughed awkwardly. "I don't even remember what you're talking about," but her eyes flicked away too fast. They all knew. They all remembered. They'd just been told not to. Jalen stood alone in the hallway, phone in hand, staring at a message that had arrived hours ago, with no sender ID. Control the story, control the damage. It never happened. That afternoon, his mother opened their mailbox and froze. Inside was a manila envelope, with no stamp, no address, just a single photograph. Malik, running. A second before the finish line, and in the background, Coach Dalton, holding a stopwatch, smiling. The moment his mother laid the envelope on the kitchen table, Jalen knew the picture wasn't just a warning. It was proof. Proof that someone was watching, digging, documenting what no one else dared to say aloud. Malik's figure frozen in mid-stride, muscles extended, foot about to cross the finish line, and just behind him, almost blurred but unmistakable, was Coach Dalton, stopwatch in hand, not angry, not panicked, smiling. Jalen stared at it long after Lana had left the room, her face drained of color. She had pressed her hand to her chest and whispered something beneath her breath, not fear but something older, grief. A mother's grief for a future she'd fought too long to protect. He didn't speak for the rest of the night, didn't eat, didn't move, only stared at the grainy photo until the silence began to pound like a second heartbeat in his ears. That image didn't just expose the past, it declared war on the future. The next night, Jalen went back to the old track. He didn't tell his mother, didn't text Malik. He just moved like something inside him was cracking open, not from pain, but from necessity. The humiliation of the friendly race, the viral mockery, the sudden eerie erasure. It had built up like storm pressure under his skin. Now it was starting to boil. The air was colder than before. Wind scraped through the broken bleachers like whispered threats. The moon hung crooked and half-shadowed. Jalen dropped his bag and began to stretch. No music, no timer, no distractions. Just him, and the sound of his own breath. And the voice in his head saying, "They want you to quit, so they can win without running." His first sprint was short, unmeasured. A burst fueled by anger, not form. His knee throbbed, but he didn't stop. He rounded the cracked curve again and again, dirt spitting beneath his soles, lungs burning with each lap. At some point he heard a voice behind him. Too high. Jalen skidded to a stop, chest heaving. Malik stood near the bleachers, hoodie pulled over his head, eyes locked on Jalen's feet. "Your stride's too high," he repeated. "You're wasting vertical lift. You're fighting air when you should be killing distance." Jalen doubled over, hands on his knees. "I don't care about clean form right now." Malik stepped closer. "You better start. Speed without control is just desperation." Jalen looked up. "Then teach me how to run like I'm angry." Malik nodded once. "No." Jalen blinked. "What? I'll teach you how to run like you've been denied." The words hung there, heavier than any insult Coach Dalton had ever thrown. Malik walked the center of the track. His steps were slow, but his body moved like it remembered what power once felt like it remembered what it was to be the fastest man in the state. Before the lie, before the silence. "You want speed?" he asked. "Then you need to know what you're running toward." Jalen stepped up beside him. "I know what I'm running from." "That's not enough," Malik said. "Pain makes you fast, but purpose makes you untouchable." The next hour blurred. Malik didn't talk like a coach. He talked like a survivor passing on a blueprint. He corrected Jalen's knee angle, his breathing pattern, the way he used his arms to slice wind instead of just pumping. Every adjustment came with a story, a moment from Malik's own erased record, a piece of his stolen future. "They'll move your markers when they start seeing you as a threat," he warned. "Not just on the track, in life." Jalen listened, absorbed, ran, then collapsed. Flat on his back, chest rising like a hammer, legs numb from exhaustion. Malik stood over him. "You think they'll stop with humiliation?" he asked. Jalen didn't answer. "They're building the same file on you they built on me," Malik continued. "They'll bait you into reacting. Then they'll say you were unstable, aggressive, Undisciplined. They'll play the victim after they break you. I'm not gonna break, Jalen whispered. Malik crouched beside him. You're already cracked. That's how they know you're real. Jalen lay there, letting the sky spin above him. Somewhere in that dizzy haze, he knew this wasn't just training. It was rebellion. By the third night, the wind had picked up. The trees around the track hissed like they were warning him. But Jalen ran anyway. Faster. Tighter. The laps were smoother now. His posture lower. His recovery time shorter. Each time he rounded the bend, he imagined Alec Carver's smirk fading behind him. Each push off the ground, he saw Dalton's clipboard snap in half. Each inhale was filled with dust and silence, and defiance. He didn't run for revenge. He ran so he wouldn't disappear. After practice, Malik handed him a towel and a small notebook. What's this? Malik looked toward the trees. Their blueprint. Jalen flipped through it. Times. Notes. Lane strategies. But also something more disturbing. Copies of old letters. Suspension records. Pages from Malik's academic file. Stamped with phrases like volatile temperament and difficulty with authority. These aren't yours, Jalen murmured.
No, Malik said, meeting his eyes. They were written for me, but they were meant for you.
Jalen felt the weight of the pages settle in his hands like a prophecy. They've been prepping your fall since the moment you enrolled, Malik said. They don't need you to fail, just to look like you did. Before Jalen could respond, his phone buzzed in his hoodie pocket.
No caller ID.
One message. They took Malik's future. Yours is next. His mouth went dry. Fingers froze over the screen. His heart didn't race. It paused, like it needed a second to decide whether to beat faster or stop entirely. He turned the phone toward Malik. You again? He asked carefully. Malik looked at the message. His jaw clenched. No, that ain't me. Then who the hell is watching this close? Malik didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back into the shadows, hoodie darkening his face. They're not watching you because you're fast, he said quietly. They're watching because you're proving them wrong, and they don't have a script for that. As Jalen walked home, the message notification expanded on his screen. Another text had arrived. Same number. This time it wasn't a threat. It was a location pin. The school board office. 12-hour. Come alone. The school board office loomed like a courthouse under fog. Jalen stood outside at 11:58 p.m. Hoodie zipped to his neck. Malik's notebook wedged beneath his arm. The building was dark. All windows black. No sign of life. No security lights flickering. Just a locked door and the echo of distant traffic. His phone buzzed. One message. Check the third window to the left. Lift. Slide. No cameras. He followed the directions. The pain moved easier than it should have. A breeze of disinfectant and paper swept over him as he slipped inside, landing in a squat. The tiles were cold. The silence was louder than anything he'd heard on the track. A light clicked on in the hallway ahead. Jalen crept forward, past framed photos of smiling board members and outdated honor rolls, all white, all curated. A door cracked open at the end of the hall. Someone inside motioned. It wasn't Malik. It was a girl, white, maybe 17, maybe 18, auburn braid, oversized hoodie, badge clipped to her shirt. Eliza, he remembered her now. The student nurse who helped out during training sometimes. Never said much. She always looked busy, but her eyes watched everything. She closed the door behind him and handed him a file. No words. Just the file. Inside, his medical record. Not the one the school had shown Coach Dalton. This one was original. Clean. Signed by the real doctor. Marked, cleared for competitive activity. Knee is fully rehabilitated. Jalen stared at it, a cold tremble settling beneath his skin. This is real? Eliza nodded. It's the version we submitted. His eyes narrowed. But the school switched it, she cut in. Dalton didn't even ask for a copy. He submitted his own. Jalen blinked, stunned. Wait, he forged it? Her jaw tensed. Not alone. The assistant principal co-signed the override. I overheard them talking in the hallway. They said it was for his own protection. Said your presence was becoming a disruption. Jalen felt the words hit like stones to the chest. He had expected sabotage. He had braced for cruelty. But this was institutional. It wasn't just Dalton. It wasn't just bias. It was system-level manipulation. Why are you showing me this? He asked, voice low. Eliza hesitated. Because I watched you run at night. I saw what they did to Malik. And if I stay quiet now, I'm just like them. She glanced at the door. But they'll come for me if they find out I told you. So keep this safe. Burn the copy if you have to. Just don't let them bury you too. Jalen tucked the file under his hoodie and backed away, heart thudding so hard it shook his ribs. Thank you, he whispered. She nodded once. You earned it. 3 days before regionals, the announcement came. Not through a team meeting. Not from the coach. Not even in private. It was printed on the athletic board, sandwiched between lunch schedules and yearbook deadlines. Final team roster, Fairhope track, regional qualifier. Below it, 17 names. Jalen Mercer's wasn't one of them. He stared at the list for a full 30 seconds before his brain caught up to what his eyes had already screamed. Then came the whispers. Wait, he's not running? Thought he was supposed to be the big comeback story. Maybe his leg finally gave out. Coach probably didn't want a liability on the track. Jalen stepped back, the hallway spinning like a carousel that wouldn't stop. He marched straight to Dalton's office, ignoring every stare, every locker slam, every fake cough, muttering cripple. Dalton was waiting, like he knew this was coming. Coach, Jalen said, breath clipped. I'm not on the roster. Dalton looked up slowly. That's correct. No explanation? Dalton folded his hands. You were deemed physically unfit. It's a safety call. Jalen clenched his fists. You didn't even talk to me. You didn't talk to my doctor. I was cleared. You know I was cleared. Dalton sighed, as if inconvenienced. You think this is personal, Mercer? I know it is. Jalen snapped. I have the real report. I know about the override. The forged signature. Everything. Dalton leaned back in his chair, smiling faintly. If you had any of that, you'd be in a courtroom right now, not whining in my doorway. Jalen's jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. Dalton stood, stepping close, voice dropping just above a whisper. You were never on this team. You were a placeholder, a PR fix for a school that needed to check a box. And now the box is checked. Jalen stared him down. You're not scared of anything, are you? Dalton grinned. Not of you. Jalen turned and walked out, heat rising from his neck to his scalp. But it wasn't anger burning now. It was strategy. Dalton had exposed something without realizing it. His arrogance wasn't just a shield, it was a flaw. He thought Jalen wouldn't fight back, thought he didn't have allies. But Jalen had something better than allies. He had evidence. That evening he met Malik at the track. The minute he saw Jalen's face, he knew. They benched you. Jalen nodded, teeth gritted. 3 days. Before regionals. No warning. Malik scoffed. Textbook. That's exactly what they did to me. Same timing, same lie. Jalen held up the file Eliza had given him. Not this time. Malik took it, flipping through the pages with slow reverence. This is enough to bury a coach. No. Jalen corrected. It's enough to dig up a whole system. They sat in silence for a moment, the wind threading through the broken bleachers, cold and sharp. Malik finally asked, What now? I'm not just gonna prove I belong on that track, Jalen said. I'm gonna prove they rigged it. Malik looked up impressed. You're thinking lawsuit? I'm thinking exposure, Jalen replied. If I go legal now, they'll stall, smear me, discredit everything. But if I build the pressure first, show people what's really happening, they won't be able to spin it, Malik finished. Jalen nodded. Exactly. Malik handed back the file. Then we better move fast. You've got 3 days to flip the narrative. Jalen stood, feeling the weight of every step before him. He wasn't chasing medals anymore. He was chasing justice. The next morning, he brought the file to the journalism club, a tiny group run by a sophomore girl named Danielle, who had a history of publishing stories the administration tried to bury. She read the file with wide eyes. Wait, this is the real medical record. Yeah, Jalen said. I need it published. No edits, no school approval, just truth. Danielle looked nervous. If I run this, they'll shut us down. Then leak it, Jalen said. Anonymously, link it to the fake one they gave the board. Make them answer to the lie before they can erase it. Danielle looked up. Serious now. Why are you trusting me with this? Jalen didn't hesitate. Because if you don't, I'm running it myself, and I won't be as careful. She smiled, a small, sharp smile. All right, let's give them something they can't delete. Jalen turned to leave, but before he reached the door, she called out, Hey, Mercer. He turned, She held up the folder. This isn't just your story anymore. Jalen nodded. I know. As he walked down the hallway, his phone buzzed. One new email. No subject. No sender. Inside was a scanned image. A staff logbook. A name was signed beneath the forged medical report. It wasn't Dalton's. It was the principal's. The moment Jalen opened the email and saw the scanned image, his stomach tightened. It wasn't the name that shocked him. It was the handwriting. The same tight, precise cursive from countless school memos and newsletters. The same signature etched at the bottom of every welcome letter and pep rally speech. Principal Everett L. Carver. Alec's father. The same man who had shaken Jalen's hand during his enrollment and called him a bright new face for Fairhope. His signature sat right beneath the fake medical report confirming the override. Not Dalton. Not a mistake. The principal. The institution. The whole system. For a long time Jalen just stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like it knew the weight of what it was exposing. He thought about burning it, deleting it, walking away. But then he remembered Malik's warning. They don't need you to fail, just to look like you did. And suddenly walking away felt like letting them finish the erasure they'd started. Lana didn't speak much on the ride to the school. She didn't need to. The silence in the car was dense with history, the kind passed down through generations of black families who'd had to walk in respectfully to buildings built to crush them. She adjusted her glasses once, straightened her blouse, but her jaw never relaxed. They walked into the administration office together. No appointment, no hesitation. The receptionist blinked when she saw them. Do you have a meeting scheduled? No, Lana said, but we're not leaving until we speak to Principal Carver. Jalen's eyes didn't leave the hallway behind the desk, the closed door that had once welcomed him in with banners and backpats. Now it felt like a fortress. The receptionist fumbled for the phone. I can see if he's available. Tell him it's about the forged medical report, Jalen said flatly. That stopped everything. 5 minutes later, they were ushered inside. Principal Carver stood as they entered, smile forced at the corners. He gestured to 2 chairs. Ms. Mercer. Jalen. What brings you in? Lana didn't sit. Neither did Jalen. Cut the act. She said. You signed it. The fake report. My son's medical override. Carver blinked, then tilted his head slightly. I'm sorry? Jalen stepped forward and slid the printed email onto the desk. Carver scanned it, slowly, expression neutral. I see, he murmured. That's your signature, Lana said. Don't pretend it's not. Carver folded his hands. You have to understand, decisions regarding student-athlete eligibility are often made in coordination with the coaching staff and health advisors. Don't play policy games. Jalen snapped. You lied. You cut me before I ever got the chance to qualify. I acted in the best interest of the school, Carver replied calmly. There were concerns about your health, your discipline. My discipline. You skipped protocol. You challenged coaches. You were involved in a number of escalating disruptions. Lana's voice cut in, sharper than ever. You tried to erase him. Carver's mask cracked barely. A flicker of discomfort showed beneath his polished tone. Let me be honest, he said, standing straighter now. Fairhope High prides itself on tradition, on unity. And frankly, your son has made himself a lightning rod. For conflict. For controversy. For division. Jalen stared at him, breath catching. So what? He asked. You decided I wasn't worth the risk. Carver didn't answer. Because he didn't need to. The silence said everything. Jalen stepped back. You recruited me. Carver's eyes didn't move. We took a chance. Lana scoffed. You took a photo op. And when it got too real, you closed ranks. Carver walked to the window behind his desk, voice lowering into something almost tired. This school needs stability. I can't allow a single student to threaten that. A single black student, you mean? Jalen said. Still, no denial. Lana turned, motioning for her son. We're done here. As they walked out, Carver called after them. If you release that file, there will be consequences. For you. For your future. I'm sure you understand. Jalen paused in the doorway, hand gripping the knob. I understand one thing, he said. You're scared of what happens when the truth runs faster than you. He shut the door behind him. They went to the school board next. No appointment, no patient. This time, it was a small office building, with glass walls and uncomfortable chairs. The woman at the front desk looked like she'd seen this kind of confrontation before, and knew how it usually ended. Lana demanded a meeting. They were told to wait. They waited. 45 minutes later, A middle-aged man in a blue blazer finally appeared. Board Chair Reynolds, smiling, neutral. I understand you have concerns about your son's eligibility, he said, motioning toward a small conference room. We're happy to address that. Lana laid the file on the table. Address this. Reynolds flipped through it. His smile didn't change. Well, I'll have to cross-reference this with official records. But that is an official record, Jalen snapped. Yours is the fake. Reynolds nodded slowly, then closed the folder. There are policies in place to determine athletic eligibility. And it's important to remember, he added, glancing at Jalen, that not every student is entitled to compete. Sometimes the decisions made are preventative, not punitive. Jalen shook his head. You all talk the same, safe words. Measured tones. But none of you will say it. Reynolds looked at him. Say what? That you didn't want me here. The silence stretched. Then Reynolds smiled again. That's not true. We wanted you here. We just didn't want the story that came with you. Jalen stood. That was the most honest thing any of them had said. As they left the room, Jalen looked back one last time. The board chair was already opening another folder, moving on. Like none of it had happened. Like Jalen Mercer had never mattered. The next day at school, everything changed. Teachers stopped making eye contact. His locker combination was changed without notice. One of his assignments was marked incomplete, even though he'd submitted it early. When he asked for clarification, the teacher said she couldn't recall receiving it. Even the lunch monitor gave him a longer scan. They were closing in, not with violence, but with silence, freezing him out one breath at a time. By sixth period, he couldn't ignore it. He no longer existed. The same school that had once announced his name over the intercom, used his face in newsletters, called him their shining future, now acted like he was invisible, not hated, not hurt, just deleted. Jalen sat in the back of the library, watching two students whisper about him as if he weren't sitting 5 feet away. He'd been erased before, but this time he was going to leave a scar behind. He reached into his bag, pulled out the original medical file, the scan of the signature, the emails, and Malik's notebook, laid them out on the table, one by one. Then he opened his laptop and began drafting a message. To the local newspaper, to the district athletics board, to every inbox he could find connected to high school sports regulation. He didn't attach the files yet. He just wrote the subject line. How many futures does Fairhope High have to erase before someone notices? His finger hovered over the send button. His phone buzzed. A new email. No subject, no sender. The body was short. Meet me tonight. 9:45 p.m. Back parking lot. Behind the stadium. Come alone. I kept everything. Attached a scanned ID badge. Assistant coach Travis Hill. Resigned 2 years ago. No reason ever made public. Beneath the message was one blurry image. Grainy, zoomed in, but clear enough to see. A folder. Labeled in sharp black ink. Malik Wright, Mercer, J. Archive. Do not release. The night air was thick with warning. Jalen walked through the back parking lot behind the stadium, with his hoodie up. Hands in pockets, eyes scanning every shadow. The gravel crunched beneath his sneakers. No lights, no security cameras, just the hum of distant field lights flickering from the main gym, across the campus. A figure leaned against a rusted chain-link gate under the bleachers. Baseball cap pulled low. Hoodie zipped to the chin. Jalen recognized him instantly. Older now, grayer around the temples, but still sharp in the eyes. Travis Hill, former assistant coach. The only staff member who used to nod at Malik without it feeling forced. You came, Travis said, voice low. I read the file. Jalen replied. You kept it. Travis didn't smile. He didn't offer a handshake. He just motioned for Jalen to follow. Come on. This part's not on the map. They moved toward the old gym, the part of the building no one used anymore. Travis punched in a passcode on a keypad hidden behind a loose panel in the brick. The lock clicked, and the door groaned open into darkness. I don't know how long this door will stay active, Travis muttered. I never turned in my master code. Probably the only reason I haven't been scrubbed yet. They stepped inside. The air was stale, filled with the scent of old floor polish, cardboard, and something older, dusted memories and unspoken names. Travis flicked on a flashlight. They called it the equipment vault. But it was never for gear. He led Jalen down a narrow hallway, past stacks of outdated textbooks and trophies, with no plates. At the end, he stopped at a door that had been painted over 5 times too many. He knocked twice. not to check if anyone was inside, but like someone paying respect to what was buried beneath. Then he pulled out a ring of keys. "I only open this when it matters," he said quietly. The lock clicked open. Inside was a narrow crawl space. No windows, no lights, just shelves, dozens of them. And on each shelf, folders, color-coded, labeled by year, and every label had one thing in common: black ink, black names, black athletes. Jalen stepped in slowly, the silence pressing against his chest. Travis reached for one of the lower shelves and pulled out a file. He handed it over without a word. Malik Wright. Final note. Medical inquiry.
Behavior reports.
Coach's observations. Jalen flipped through it. Photos. Handwritten notes. Printouts of emails. A disciplinary form that claimed Malik had aggressively disobeyed coaching directives on 3 separate occasions, none of which Malik had ever mentioned. A red stamp on the last page. Recommended removal. Instability. Jalen swallowed. They said he had behavioral issues. Travis nodded grimly. They always say that. It's the safest language. Sounds objective. Sounds clinical. He walked to the far corner and pulled another folder. Jalen's name was on it. He stared at it for a long moment before taking it. He hadn't even opened it yet, and he could already feel it, like the folder itself had weight. Inside, mock reports dated 6 months before he transferred, notes from a behavioral assessment that never happened, a list of disciplinary concerns marked to be activated if student protests school decisions. But what stopped his breath cold was the top sheet, dated 2 years ago, before he'd ever set foot in Fairhope High, before he'd been recruited, before the fall, before the lie. The form wasn't about discipline. It was a request. Transfer student profile for integration PR consideration. Jalen's name was listed in the top right corner. He read the lines slowly, his fingers trembling. Candidate demonstrates appropriate GPA. Background includes athletic injury. Offers media-friendly redemption narrative. Recommendation: position as public relations offset to community concerns over lack of diversity representation. Jalen felt the blood drain from his face. They didn't bring him here because he was fast, or smart, or resilient. They brought him here to look good on paper, and they'd started the plan before they ever met him. Travis stepped beside him. "I didn't know the extent until after they buried Malik. Then I started watching closer. They were building the same story around you. Just cleaner this time." Jalen stared at the wall, every folder now a silent scream. "How many kids?" he asked. Travis didn't answer. Instead, he walked back toward the entrance and picked up a clipboard hanging from a hook. He handed it to Jalen. The list had 34 names, all black, all athletes, each one marked with an outcome: disqualified, injury, behavioral concern, transfer, expelled. Jalen scanned the years. Some names were circled in red. One had a cross drawn through it. He pointed to it. "Who's this?" Travis hesitated. "Kendrick Salter, sprinter, class of..."
What happened to him?
Travis looked away. OD'd after they pulled his scholarship. School never admitted the connection. Parents tried to sue, but nothing stuck. Jalen's hands curled into fists. Not out of rage, out of grief. Grief for stories that had never been told. Grief for talent that had never been allowed to grow. He turned slowly. "And they kept it all," he whispered. "All of it. Here. Like a vault of stolen futures." Travis nodded. "They don't destroy the records," he said. "They keep them. Just in case." "In case of what?" "In case someone speaks out. They can weaponize the story, twist it, prove they were right all along." Jalen's voice cracked. "They started my file before I even applied." Travis turned pale. 2 years ago, that... He didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he reached for a locked drawer beneath the shelves. "There's something else," he said, voice trembling now. "Something I've never shown anyone." He opened it. Inside, wrapped in a towel, was a USB drive. Black, unlabeled. "I found this after Malik was cut," he said. "I think someone in admin saved the internal meetings. They were careless. I copied it before they locked the servers." Jalen took it slowly. "What's on it?" "I haven't watched all of it, but the first few files." Travis looked away. "One is a meeting between the principal, Dalton, and the school board. They're talking about Malik, how to manage the image post-disqualification. And the rest?" Travis hesitated. "One of them has your name." I stopped watching after that. The crawl space suddenly felt smaller. Jalen stared at the USB drive like it was a live wire. He thought he'd seen the worst of it. The racism, the erasure, the cover-ups. But now he realized, those weren't accidents. They were intentional blueprints, and his name had been part of the design long before he ever stepped foot on campus. He looked at Travis, eyes burning. "Why are you showing me this now?" Travis's voice cracked. "Because I didn't save Malik. But I can still help you." They stood in silence, the folders around them like the dead, watching. Jalen closed the file on his name and slid it into his backpack. He took Malik's too. He wouldn't leave them behind. He wouldn't let them rot in the dark any longer. As they stepped out of the crawl space, Jalen's phone buzzed again. No sender. Just 4 words. "You opened the vault." When Jalen left the crawl space that night, he wasn't just holding folders. He was carrying the truth. And the truth, he learned quickly, was a dangerous thing to hold, especially in a place that had built its reputation on burying it. The next morning, he didn't go to class. He went to a law office. It wasn't some towering firm downtown. It was a small office on the edge of the city with peeling paint on the windows and a fading sign that read, "Evans, Morris, and Tate, Civil Rights and Education Law." The woman at the front desk didn't blink when Jalen walked in, holding a folder labeled with his own name and Malik's in black ink. She just said, "Mr. Evans is in," and pointed to a door. 30 minutes later, Jalen had told the entire story. He laid out the USB drive, the forged reports, the predated recruitment files, and the list of 34 erased names. He didn't cry. He didn't stutter. He just spoke like someone tired of bleeding in silence. Mr. Evans, a tall black man, with wireframe glasses, and the kind of voice that didn't rise but always commanded attention, sat back in his chair. "They've been running this scheme for years," he said. "Quiet discrimination is one thing. Fabricated documentation, that's something else." "So can I sue?" Jalen asked. Mr. Evans nodded slowly. "Not just sue. We can file for civil rights violations, academic sabotage, and institutional retaliation. But Jalen," he leaned forward, eyes sharp, "when we do this, it won't be a school fight. It'll be a public war." Jalen didn't hesitate. "Then I want to run toward it." The lawsuit hit the school like a grenade. It was filed publicly, loudly. Mr. Evans made sure every local paper, education blog, and regional media outlet had a copy of the court complaint. It named Principal Carver. It named Coach Dalton. It named the assistant principal, the athletic board, and the school district. The language was sharp, surgical. It didn't accuse Fairhope High of being racist in sentiment. It accused them of being racist in structure. The school struck back immediately. By Monday, Jalen's student portal was locked. On Tuesday, he was informed that 2 of his core class credits were under review due to academic integrity concerns. By Wednesday, his counselor sent an email saying graduation eligibility may be in jeopardy, pending investigation. No specifics. Just threats. The very same institution that had once called him a model student athlete now branded him as a disruption. But Jalen didn't blink. He brought every message, every system change, every error to Mr. Evans. They documented everything. And then, the community noticed. It started with a post from Danielle, the journalism club editor. She leaked the redacted lawsuit on a private blog and titled it, "How Fairhope High Erased Its Black Runners." By the end of the day, it had 30,000 shares. Then came the whispers. Parents started asking questions at school board meetings. Black families who had long suspected something was wrong, who had lost scholarships, seen promising athletes suddenly injured or benched without explanation, began to speak up. One mother, whose son transferred in 2017 after being benched with no warning, commented on the article, "I thought it was just us. They told me he lacked discipline. He cried for weeks." Another father posted, "Coach Dalton cut my son a day before state. Said it was a paperwork error. Now I know better." The silence was cracking. And through it all, Jalen kept running. Not at school, never on the official track. But at night, on back roads, in dirt alleys behind the rec center, on broken pavement and worn grass. Because the one thing they couldn't control, the one thing they never truly measured, was his will. 3 weeks into the legal battle, a court hearing was scheduled. Not in secret. Public. Fairhope District Court. 9:00 a.m. Friday. The room was small but packed. On one side, the school's lawyers, 5 of them in matching suits and perfect posture. On the other, Jalen, Mr. Evans, and Lana. Jalen wore his old Roosevelt hoodie, the one from the school that never got to honor him. The judge, A gray-haired woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense voice reviewed the case materials silently for 15 minutes before speaking. "This court sees grounds for a fast-tracked civil hearing," she said. "Due to the seriousness of the documentation provided, and in light of the defendant's retaliatory behavior since filing, I will allow this case to proceed under accelerated review."
The school's lead attorney stood. "Your Honor, may I suggest that this hearing be limited to academic impact? There's no need to involve athletic events." The judge cut him off.
"Respectfully, this isn't about athletics. It's about access. The plaintiff claims that his removal from competition was racially motivated and structurally supported. That is not a sports matter. That is a civil rights matter." The room fell silent. Then the judge turned to Jalen. "You say you were denied the chance to qualify for state due to forged documentation?" "Yes, Your Honor. And if given the chance now, would you compete?" Jalen nodded. "Yes. Even after the injuries?" "Yes. Even after the sabotage." He hesitated, then said softly, "Especially because of the sabotage." The judge leaned back. "The regional meets are over, but the state board allows wildcard entries under appeal." She glanced at the court clerk. "I can issue an order." Murmurs filled the room. The judge tapped her gavel once. "I am willing to allow this case to proceed on one condition. Mr. Mercer must compete at state finals. Alone. Unattached. No school affiliation." Jalen's heartbeat pounded in his ears. The lawyer on the other side stood up immediately. "Your Honor, that's highly irregular." The judge held up a hand. "It's not about regular. It's about justice. And if Mr. Mercer is telling the truth, then the world deserves to see what Fairhope tried to erase." She looked at Jalen. "Do you accept?" He looked at Lana, at Mr. Evans, at the rows of black families, now staring at him like hope had finally grown a face. Then he nodded. "Yes." The judge banged the gavel once. "Motion granted. State finals. 1 week from today." Outside the courthouse, the media was waiting. Not national, not yet, but local enough to matter. One reporter shoved a mic forward. "Jalen, how does it feel to be running against a system instead of just other runners?" Jalen looked into the camera. "I've been doing that my whole life," he said. "Now they just finally gave it a name." Malik met him by the sidewalk after the crowd had started to disperse. He didn't say anything, just handed Jalen a folded slip of paper. "What's this?" "Your old split times," Malik said. "From the night you started to fight back." Jalen opened it. His fastest time since the injury for not a record, not yet, but faster than most thought possible. He looked at Malik. "You ever wish you could go back and run that final again?" Malik nodded slowly. "Every day." Jalen clenched the paper in his fist. "Then this one's for both of us." Malik smiled. For once it wasn't sad. It was proud. That night, Jalen sat at his desk staring at the court documents, the medical files, the grainy photos of Coach Dalton, the USB drive. But the thing that caught his attention most was the last folder Travis had given him. One he hadn't dared open yet. It was thicker than the others, labeled only confidential internal meeting transcripts. He opened it, skimmed the first few pages, and froze. Because on page 5, dated 3 months before he transferred, was a printed transcript of a staff meeting. Principal Carver, Coach Dalton, district reps. His name mentioned 8 times. They weren't discussing his injury. They weren't discussing his potential. They were discussing how to market him, how to frame him as inspiration, how to drop him quietly after his redemption story arc peaked. They had scripted his fall before he ever set foot on their track. At the bottom of the page, a redacted section was hastily unblocked. One last line: "If Mercer goes public, activate option B, discredit. Leak the Roosevelt incident. Frame as unstable." State finals did not feel like a competition. It felt like a trial. The morning air outside the stadium was cold, almost metallic. A storm had passed through before dawn, leaving the pavement slick and the sky washed pale. The stadium's towering floodlights hummed above the track, casting long shadows where Jalen walked alone. No warm-up squad, no stretching circle, no coach calling split times, just plain running shoes. A borrowed stopwatch, a lane assignment no one fought for, and a silence heavy enough to crush the ribs of someone less determined. He stepped into the athlete entrance. Runners from other schools clustered in groups, matching jackets, identical duffel bags, easy camaraderie. Some glanced at him with curiosity, others with snickering recognition. "That's the lawsuit kid," someone whispered. "That's the one who got benched at regionals." He's not even sponsored. Look at his shoes. But none of them said it directly to his face. They didn't need to. The distance they gave him was already its own statement. On the bleachers, the crowd buzzed with the restless curiosity of people who had heard rumors but didn't know the story. Not the real one. Parents sipped coffee from paper cups. Middle school teams waved banners. Vendors shouted for pretzels and ice-cold water. Somewhere behind the noise, Lana sat alone, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. She scanned the athletes' area, waiting for Jalen to appear through the tunnel. Her heart swelled when he did. Not because he looked confident, though he did, with shoulders squared and chin lifted, but because he looked like he belonged more here, standing alone in worn shoes, than any boy in a bright uniform. This was where he was meant to be. On track, on record, unsilenced. Mr. Evans sat beside her, reviewing the court's motion documents with quiet intensity. If he finishes clean, the lawyer murmured, it strengthens everything. This isn't just symbolic. It's legal leverage. Lana exhaled shakily. He's running against a machine, then let's hope the machine finally slips. Down on the field, Jalen approached the check-in table. A race official eyed his plain attire, unimpressed. School affiliation? The official asked. Unaffiliated, Jalen replied. The official raised a brow. Independent runner? Yes. The man clicked his pen and scribbled something. Lane 6. Try not to slow the heat. Jalen's jaw tightened. He walked toward the starting area and stopped. The stadium was filling. Not with parents. Not with fans. With men and women none of the officials recognized. Older, younger, black. Alone or in clusters. Some carried folding chairs. Some wore faded track jackets from years long gone. Some leaned on canes. Some had missing limbs. Some had medals tucked under shirts, like secrets. But all of them shared one thing. They were watching him. Only him. And then one of them, a woman with silver braids, sitting in a wheelchair, tapped her neighbor and nodded toward the track. Look, she murmured. There he is. A ripple moved through the stands. Faces lifted, eyes sharpened. Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs into a low rumbling. One by one they stood. Rows of black athletes, who had once run for Fairhope, or tried, or trained until they were discarded. Athletes whose names Jalen had seen in the forbidden crawlspace folders. Athletes whose stories had been twisted into footnotes. Athletes who had walked, or limped, out of the system with shoulders lowered, and potential stolen. And they were here. For him. For themselves. For the truth. One voice rose from the crowd. Deep. Strong. Steady. Run. Another joined. Then, another. Soon the word echoed across the stadium. Unbroken. Like thunder. Run. 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 Jalen's breath caught. He had imagined running for justice. He never imagined running with an army. The announcer's voice crackled through the speaker system. Next event. Men's 400-meter final. Will all runners report to the starting blocks? Jalen moved slowly, absorbing every step. His lane was painted a faded white, chipped at the edges. Like it too had been waiting for someone who refused to disappear. He took his place at the starting mark. Lane 4 held Alec Carver, the golden boy of Fairhope High, wearing the school's pristine blue and gold uniform. He didn't look at Jalen, but his smirk made it clear he knew exactly who he was racing. One of Alec's teammates leaned over the barrier. Make it quick, Carver. Smoke him. The words felt familiar, not because they were cruel, but because cruelty had become background noise in Jalen's life. He tuned it out. The other runners stretched, shook out their legs, tightened their spikes. Jalen felt his knee pulse, but not painfully. It was a reminder of the ditch, the baton, the medical lies, the bleach, the laughter. Everything they'd tried to crush him with became fuel. He closed his eyes, inhaled, and built a quiet storm in his chest. He could feel Malik watching from the stands. He couldn't see him, but he felt it, a steady presence, a second heartbeat, pushing him forward. The official raised the starting gun. On your marks. Jalen bent into position. Fingers pressed to the track. Spine curled forward. Set. The world shrank. Just breath. Just heartbeat. Just purpose. Bang. They launched. Alex surged ahead immediately. Textbook form. Smooth acceleration. Arms slicing through the air. The crowd roared for him first. He was the familiar favorite. But Jalen didn't push at the start. He flowed. Malik had warned him. You don't win a 400 in the first 50. You win it when everyone else starts dying. He settled into rhythm. Foot strike, breath. Foot strike, breath. Lane 6 curved wide, forcing him farther outside. But he leaned into it, finding space in the disadvantage. By the 100-meter mark, he was mid-pack. By 150, the crowd noticed that he hadn't fallen behind. Alec glanced sideways, surprised. By 200 meters, Jalen felt the familiar burn, the catch in his chest where fear usually sat. But there was no fear today. Only fire. He pushed. His stride lengthened. His footfalls sharpened. His shoulders stayed low and balanced. By 250, he passed one runner. By 280, he passed two. A wave of cheers erupted from the stands, not the usual crowd, but the forgotten runners, the ones who had traveled miles to chant him forward. Run, run. Alec's smirk faded. Jalen was gaining. Hard. Alec tried to accelerate, but his form faltered at the curve. That was the price of perfection. It cracked under pressure. Jalen moved like someone running not for victory, but for oxygen, for survival, for legacy. At 320 meters, he was side by side with Alec. The stadium sucked in a collective breath. Alec's eyes widened. What? How? Jalen didn't look at him. He didn't need to. At 340 meters, he surged. The kind of surge you don't get from training or coaching or privilege. The kind born from knowing the finish line wasn't just a mark on the ground. It was an escape from the lie they built for him. Alec faded behind him. The stands shook. The chant roared like a storm breaking open.
Ayon.
And Jalen did. His lungs screamed. His legs burned. But he did not slow. The final stretch was a blur of white paint, screaming voices, trembling air. He crossed the line, and the stadium exploded. This time, the cheer wasn't polite. It wasn't rehearsed. It was raw, overwhelming, unfiltered joy from people who had waited years, decades to see someone cross a finish line they were never allowed to reach. Jalen collapsed to his knees, not from pain but from the weight lifting off his shoulders all at once. He had done it. Not for Fairhope, not for Dalton, not for the principal, for every name buried in those folders. But the moment lasted only a breath. Lane violation. A race official suddenly shouted, stepping forward. Voices gasped. Runners turned. Reporters scrambled. Alec froze mid-step. The official raised a red flag. Runner in lane 6 drifted outside mark.
No, he didn't.
Someone yelled from the stands. Another voice joined. Then another. Then dozens.
That's a lie.
He stayed in lane. We saw it. Cameras swung toward the official. Phones lifted. Live streams rolled bright green circles on dozens of screens. This time, nothing could be silenced. Nothing could be erased. But the official kept talking. Lane 6 violated. No, he didn't. Someone said sharply behind him. It was another official, holding a tablet, streaming the race, in slow motion, showing every stride, every mark, every angle. Lane 6 was clean. The crowd roared, and the first official paled. Just as the crowd erupted, an alert flashed across every live stream screen. A sudden blackout, a digital interruption. A message appeared. Results under review, do not exit. He stood alone at the starting blocks, the stadium lights pressing against his skin like judgment. No uniform, no school logo, no coach, just his breath, his pulse and his rage. All around him, runners adjusted their blocks. Officials shouted final calls. The infield buzzed with coaches, clipboards, and coordinated warm-ups. But Jalen had no circle. No one timing his splits. No one waiting with a towel and water bottle. He was running on borrowed time, borrowed shoes, and decades of swallowed pain. But he had something they didn't. He had vengeance. It wasn't a desire for glory. This wasn't about medals or podiums. It was about exercising every moment they told him he didn't belong. Every file they fabricated. Every time they looked him in the eye and erased him with a smile. This wasn't a race for speed. It was a trial by fire, and Jalen had come to burn everything they'd built with lies. The announcer's voice boomed across the stadium, a flat tone betraying the tension electrifying the field. Next heat, 400-meter boys final. Unattached runner in lane 5. Jalen Mercer. A hush fell over the bleachers. And then it started again. The chant. Quiet at first, then rising, building like thunder beneath the skin. Run, run, run. It didn't come from the crowd in school colors. It came from the back rows, from the forgotten seats, from the people who had driven hours in silence. carrying their erased histories like protest signs inside their lungs. Black former athletes, Malik among them, stood tall, arms crossed, eyes locked on the track. Jalen didn't look at them. He didn't need to. He felt them, like wind behind him, like memory under his soles. The starter raised the gun. On your marks. Jalen sank into his stance. Every muscle remembered something different. His shoulders remembered the days he wasn't allowed to lift his head. His calves remembered the false diagnosis. His spine remembered the weight of silence. Set. The world narrowed. Just 8 lanes. One mission. Bang. He exploded. The first 50 meters were smoke and fire, not raw power-controlled fury. He didn't sprint recklessly. He calculated. Remembered Malik's whispered advice from late-night sessions on empty streets. Don't chase them. Make them chase you. By the first curve he was mid-pack. By the 50-meter mark, he was pushing past the outer runners. One by one, the crowd saw it. The officials saw it. Even the smug anchor at Tane 3 started to falter. But Jalen, he didn't see any of them. He saw the nurse's office where they lied to him. He saw the plaque with Malik's name scratched out. He saw the bleach-soaked ankle wrap. The deleted video. The folder labeled with his downfall before he'd even transferred. He saw everything, and he turned it into fuel. By the 300-meter mark, he wasn't just leading. He was soaring.
Not like a hero.
Like a storm. The pain in his knee surged like a flame. Sharp, brutal, unforgiving. But it wasn't weakness anymore. It was history made flesh. And he welcomed it. Embraced it. Let it pour down his leg and into the track as speed. He hit the final curve with no one in his peripheral vision. Only the roar. Only the sound of people who had never been heard before. Only his name, not whispered, not mocked, but shouted like a weapon. The final 100 meters were the longest of his life. Everything in him screamed, muscles tore, lungs burned, vision blurred. But he clenched his fists and roared back with his body. His stride didn't shorten. It widened. He ran like he was chasing every injustice that ever wore a smile. And the finish line, God, that line, it didn't look like victory. It looked like release. He crossed it with a scream trapped in his chest, and a silence splitting open behind him. Then everything stopped. No celebration, no cartwheels, no fist pumps. Just the sound of his body hitting the track. He collapsed the moment his foot hit past the line. Face first, arms spread wide like he'd fallen off the edge of the world. Officials rushed in. A medic knelt beside him. Someone shouted for oxygen. But Jalen didn't move. His face was against the cool track surface. His breath was shallow. His eyes were closed. The stadium, just seconds ago a hurricane of sound, held its breath. Every camera turned. Every phone stayed recording. The scoreboard flickered. Time delay. Then it flashed. Unofficial time 45:32. Silence. Shock. Then disbelief. The previous meet record, Malik's old number, long buried in redacted reports, had been 45.92. Jalen had just broken it. By more than half a second. On a bad leg. With no team, no warm-up, no lane support, no gear, just rage. And then the whisper came again. Not from the bleachers but from the field. Is he okay? No one answered. His body lay still, eyes closed, chest barely rising. A medic pressed fingers to his neck. Another unzipped the emergency bag. In the stands, Lana stood frozen, hands to her mouth, lips trembling. Mr. Evans had dropped his phone. Even Malik didn't move. He stood like stone, eyes locked on the figure on the ground. Everything Jalen had carried, the files, the pain, the betrayal, it had all been poured into that one run. Now the question everyone silently asked was, had he paid for it with the last thing he had left? The scoreboard refreshed again. Performance under official review. Another delay. The officials gathered near the finish. One of them pointed toward Jalen's lane, gesturing erratically. Another shook their head. Tension bloomed again. Had there been a foul? A technicality? A violation? The crowd began to murmur. The silence turned sour. A man in a suit, a rep from the state's athletic board, whispered something into his walkie-talkie. Then he turned and jogged toward the finish line marshal. Malik stepped down from the bleachers. He wasn't supposed to be on the track. He didn't care. He crossed the gate, ducked under the barrier, and made his way to Jalen's side. The medics looked up, but didn't stop him. Malik crouched, whispered his name once. No movement. He leaned closer. Jalen, it's over. You did it. You broke it. Still nothing. Then finally, A whisper, barely audible. They'll say it didn't count. Malik closed his eyes. Let them try. He gently turned Jalen's head to the side, revealing his face. There were tears, not from fear, from release. Then slowly, with a grunt like a man coming back from war, Jalen shifted. He sat up, barely, but he sat, and the crowd erupted. 100 fists went into the air. The stands shook, people cried. Former runners fell into each other's arms, sobbing. And in the middle of it all, Jalen looked up, face streaked with sweat and tears and exhaustion, and saw the clouds above the stadium had split wide open. Sunlight poured down on Lane 5, the place they tried to bury him. He had risen. But as the medics helped him to his feet, and the camera zoomed in, a figure stepped onto the track behind the row of officials. Clean polo, sharp jaw, clipboard under arm. Coach Dalton, still smirking, still standing like none of this mattered. Reporters immediately noticed him. Microphones were raised. A sideline reporter stepped forward, clearly hoping for a post-race quote. She thrust the mic toward him. Coach Dalton, Jalen Mercer just broke a state record. Any comment on the race? Dalton adjusted his collar and gave a slow, smug shrug. It doesn't count, he said. The crowd fell silent again. He spoke louder this time, straight into the mic. He's not one of ours. Across the stadium, every screen suddenly flickered and began playing unedited footage from a hidden camera. A voice rang out.
This is what Coach Dalton said the night they cut Malik right.
The roar of the crowd hit Jalen like a wave, then fractured into 1,000 shards the moment the live stream's green-red live icon blinked steady in every corner of the stadium's video feed. For a fleeting instant the world seemed to pause. Cameras locked, phones held high, commentators' voices frozen, as Jalen crawled forward in the dust, chest heaving, shoelaces untied from the force of the collapse, body trembling under the weight of everything he carried. Then the flood broke loose. The microphones crackled. Screams rose. Phones rattled in grip. And every screen across state lines lit up with his name, his pain, his truth. He didn't see the times. He didn't see the officials' huddle. He didn't see the instant replay projections, or the video technicians punching buttons. All he saw were faces, faces he'd thought dead to hope, erupting, roaring, standing, former runners from years, erased, mothers whose sons had vanished from rosters, athletes whose names never made the news. They had come, not for a record, not for glory, for justice, for recognition, and for once their voices shook the stadium louder than privilege ever had. A commentator's voice cracked over the loudspeaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a verified time. 45.32 seconds. Unbelievable. This changes everything. Another voice, breathless, added, he's shattered the previous state record by 0.6 of a second. On an unaffiliated run. No school backing. The words echoed like gavel strikes. On the track, Jalen's blurred vision sharpened. For the first time in a long while, what he had done felt real, like someone had turned a kiln on the lies, until they melted away. The track judges looked at each other, their clipboards trembling. Officials whispered into walkie-talkies. On the infield, the scoreboard flickered. The crowd's cheering hushed for a beat, disbelief hanging in the air. For years, decades, the athletic establishment had fed on control, on silence, on deletion. But tonight, deletion failed. Tonight, proof existed, and the governing body of the State Track Federation, a panel known for enforcement, not mercy, had no choice but to acknowledge it. One official approached the press box. A hush descended as he raised a red folder stamped "Final Verification." Reporters leaned forward, fingers poised over record buttons. The stadium lights seemed to dim under the weight of what was about to happen. The official opened the folder slowly, revealing a copy of the unedited broadcast, split timer logs, and a signature from the chief timekeeper. He cleared his throat. Record stands, he declared. The pause that followed felt infinite. Then the eruption returned, this time louder, deeper, more raw. Jalen could barely breathe. Every step he took now felt heavy. Heavy with truth, with vindication, with weight he had never meant to carry, but couldn't refuse. Malik, standing near the gate, raised his fist, not in triumph, but in solidarity. Old runners on crutches, amputees with prosthetics, drooped parents, shuttered siblings, they all lifted the memory of erased dreams and held them high. The chant started again, Low and steady at first. Run, run, run. Then rising, building. A wave of acceptance, not from those with medals, but from those who knew the cost of silence. Reporters pushed forward, but this time not to catch the dust. This time to catch history. Cameras zoomed on Jalen's face. Dirt-streaked, sweat-lined, anxious relief, etched deep under his eyes. Flashbulbs popped. Some cried. Others raised fists. Phones continued recording, capturing not just the moment, but the atmosphere, the change, in every frame, in every pixel evident. Back in the press area, a senior reporter, voice shaky, asked Jalen, "You did this alone. No coach, no school. What does this mean?" Jalen's reply was quiet, but carried across the field. "It means they can't hide it anymore. Not sleepwalk it. Not bury it. Not by silence. Not erase us." His words rippled outward, quiet but fierce, like a shot fired across a hallway where lies used to echo unchallenged. Meanwhile, the live broadcast wasn't just being watched locally, it was streaming online. Within minutes, the video had thousands of shares. Comments flooded. "He ran us all into history. They erased him. Then they erased Malik. They erased us all. Not anymore." This is what fairness sounds like. A trending tag emerged, an Haran after them. In living rooms across the state, people who had nothing to do with high school track but knew what erasure felt like watched, shared, believed. Thousands of eyes had opened. The truth was no longer local. It was viral. The governing body meeting convened on site. Officials huddled behind closed doors. The stadium sat like a courtroom full of witnesses. Rumors floated. Appeal from the school, technical review, disqualification. But the broadcast logs, the official timer sheets, the CCTV from multiple angles, they all aligned. There was no miscount, no lane fault, no unofficial claim. The video was the original master feed. The timesheet was stamped. The verification protocol was complete. By sunset, the official banner across the stadium read, "New state record, 400 m. Jalen Mercer, 45.2." It wasn't Garland's record. It wasn't someone they could scrub from rosters. It was his, written, verified, time-stamped, like a tombstone carved against oblivion. On the field, as the crowd dispersed, Jalen's mother found him. She didn't hug him. She didn't shout. She reached out and touched his arm, gently, once the kind of touch that held decades of fear and hope in one tremble. She whispered, "They can't lie about this now." Jalen nodded, voice thick. "No." Malik came up beside him. "You ever see a storm this bright?" he asked quietly. "This early?" Jalen shook his head, but inside he felt one building. A storm not of anger, but of exposure. Yet, as the adrenaline faded, and the lights dimmed, something cold crawled through the aftermath. A hush moving through the officials, nervous glances, the kind of look that waits for mistakes, a hesitation in the media, not excitement anymore. Caution, because when a record like that hits, so does pressure. On committees, on reputations, on redacted history. Into that hush stepped Coach Dalton. He walked forward slowly, clipped shoes on the asphalt, clipboard under his arm, a calmness in his frame that looked too practiced to be real. Reporters parted for him, microphones snapping toward his face like trap triggers. Dalton paused, eyes scanning the crowd, as if he were picking out actors in a play no one had rehearsed for. He lifted his chin and spoke into the mic, voice smooth and measured. "It doesn't count," he said. "He's not one of ours." The words hit like ice. The roar froze. The cameras shivered. Phones dropped. People blinked. Silence found them again, but it was a tighter silence, full of questions. Not cries, not cheers. Shock, confusion, disbelief. A silence that tasted bitter. Even the screens flickered at that moment. A technical glitch, or something more deliberate? The live stream froze, then snapped back. Comments went blank. Views paused. The feed stuttered. Some people thought they lost connection. Others knew better. This was control. Old control. The same control that had erased names, erased records, erased voices. Jalen felt it, not in his muscles, but in his mind. Not in his knee, but in his soul. Dalton was laying the foundation for a new lie, one as dangerous as the last. The record could stand, but Dalton's words would cast doubt, separateness, disqualification without evidence, a verdict before review. Malik stepped forward, anger flickering in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but a hand official, gloved clipped, raised a barrier of protocol. Reporters backed off. The field emptied. Lights started to dim. The crowd dispersed. Phones shut off. The cheer dissolved into murmurs. But on one screen, the one held by a student live streaming to the entire country, the freeze frame remained. Jalen crossing the line. The ticker 45 for 2. And in the bottom corner the small red live icon, still pulsing. That image would not die tonight. Not with a whisper. Not with a press release. Not with a "he's not one of ours." Because millions had seen it. Millions had heard it. And millions now carried a record that couldn't be hidden. As the last lights faded, and the stadium emptied, Jalen sat down on the track. Head bowed, arms wrapped around knees. The finality of speed, of justice, of history, didn't feel victorious. It felt like standing at the edge of something deeper. A reckoning. Coach Dalton's words hung in the hush. He's not one of ours. But the crowd, the TV screens, the proof said otherwise. And somewhere in the silence, 100 erased names exhaled. As Jalen lifted his head, the scoreboard blinked again. Not with results, but with a message. Official review initiated. Do not announce. Behind the curtain, a voice snarled. Begin Operation Wipeout. 3 weeks passed like a slow-burning fuse. The fire didn't come in a single explosion. It came in waves. Press conferences, hearings, legal briefs, reviews, testimonies. But with every passing day, the lie that had cloaked Fairhope High for decades unraveled thread by thread. The governing body held emergency sessions. Reporters swarmed the district building. The live stream from the final race continued to circulate, unedited, unstoppable, played on morning shows, retweeted by athletes with blue checks, and no filters. Jalen Mercer's name was now trending not just in state sports circuits, but in national headlines. The lawsuit did not just challenge a result, it challenged a culture. Depositions revealed more than they intended. Internal emails, hidden records, informal recommendation blacklists, circulated between athletic departments. The folders Jalen had discovered became physical evidence. Coaches from other schools stepped forward. One admitted to receiving pressure from a whisper network. Administrators quietly coordinating who to sideline, who to favor, who to help transition out under the guise of injury or team chemistry. Malik's name surfaced again and again, not as a footnote but as a ghost who had warned them all too late. And then came the verdict. In a press room packed with microphones, Lana Mercer sat in the front row, flanked by Mr. Evans and Malik. As the judge's ruling was read aloud, a hush fell as the official transcript echoed through the room. Based on corroborated evidence, suppressed medical evaluations, coordinated record manipulation, and racial bias embedded in decision-making processes, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Jalen Mercer. There was no applause, just a silence that rang louder than any cheer ever could. Coach Dalton was fired before the hour ended. No appeal. No statement. Just an email stripped of its courtesy lines, and a headline that read like a tombstone. Fairhope coach terminated amid scandal. But even in disgrace, Dalton didn't blink. He didn't speak. He left the building with his head high, as if the system he built would survive without him. It wouldn't. A week later, the school announced the renovation of its trophy room. Not as decoration, but as reparation. What had once been a narrow hallway filled with dusty banners and sanitized records was transformed into a public gallery. At its center, on the west-facing wall that caught the light each morning, 2 names were etched into a newly installed plaque. Malik Wright, 400 Meller State Champion. Jalen Mercer, 400 Meller State Champion. Beneath their names, carved in bold brass, a single line: you can't delete truth. But Fairhope didn't stop there. The school board, pressured by local activists and national media, voted unanimously to rename the athletic complex. The old name, tied to a segregationist superintendent long dead, but long honored, was stripped. In its place, carved into steel, welded above the entrance, Mercer Field. The dedication ceremony wasn't loud. It wasn't overproduced. It was quiet, intimate. Malik stood beside Jalen as the curtain dropped. A local youth choir hummed the national anthem in minor key. No press, just people, families, alumni, teachers who had once stayed silent, now standing in the sun with open eyes. A full scholarship offer came days later, not out of pity, not out of publicity, out of merit. Jalen was no longer the kid limping into a gym full of doubt. He was the one whose name would lead a roster, not trail behind one. The university made it clear. They didn't want his story. They wanted his talent. And this time, that line wasn't a trap. Still, for Jalen it wasn't over. Not yet. He had one place left to visit. One door left unopened. The gym. The same gym where the laughter had pierced him before his first step. Where Dalton had looked at him like a mistake. Where folded notes and bleach-stained wraps had replaced encouragement and water breaks. He hadn't stepped back inside since the race, but now with his name carved in stone and his past vindicated, it was time. He walked through the back entrance. The hall lights flickered like they always had, paint chipped where years of cleats had scraped corners. The air smelled the same. Sweat, dust, old hope. He moved past the lockers, past the benches, into the corridor where his journey had begun, and then he stopped. His locker, number 1, it was closed, but not locked. Something fluttered just beneath the crack of the door. Jalen reached out slowly, the air tightening around him. He pulled it open. Inside, sitting neatly on the middle shelf, was a folded sheet of paper. Not aged, not worn. Fresh. Written in the same kind of ink that once scrawled, "You don't belong here." Only this one said something different. "You outran them. Now burn the whole system." No signature. No name. Just the message. Jalen stared at it for a long time. He didn't feel fear. He didn't feel triumph. He felt invitation. He folded the note slowly, slid it into his pocket, and stepped back from the locker. The light above buzzed once, then steadied. Somewhere in the building a door creaked, not open, but ajar, as if the place itself was watching. He walked out without looking back. Some legacies are built by standing tall, others by refusing to kneel. But the rarest are carved when someone outruns the lie that tried to define them, and then goes back to make sure no one else has to. As Jalen exited into the sun, his phone buzzed with an anonymous text. It read, "What they did at Fairhope was just chapter 1. You ready to run again?" A second later, coordinates. A city, a date, a name. Newberry High. 2 runners buried, 1 still missing. If you believe stories like Jalen's deserve to be seen, not silence, type yes in the comments. Share this so no one forgets what they tried to erase. Subscribe to keep these truths alive, because this isn't just a story, it's a mirror, and it's time the world looked in.